Sometimes I like to hate follow certain characters in the industry, certain journalists that, it's almost like their career is similar to a car crash. You don't want to look, but you derive some kind of strange, deep human fascination out of watching them flame out. I guess being trapped in this Twitter echo chamber where none of your ideas are ever challenged, I feel like it does create these twisted individuals, which, for me, I don't know, maybe it's just I'm interested in human psychology, who knows? But I gotta say, I do enjoy lurking some of these journalists' comment threads, because with a guy like Matt Lees, the British gaming journalist Matt Lees, he truly is trapped in a bubble of his own creation. He has fully insulated himself from criticism, for you see, Matt is one of these almost religious worshippers of insane far-left ideology. Seems like a common thing amongst the journalist class, and he's not just, a irritating San Francisco liberal, God forbid, right? He's an actual card-carrying Marxist. He's like deconstructing the very nature of a game, just in terms of linguistics. What is a game? Is Twitter a game? He did a presentation, I think it was at Gamescom, where he's questioning the very nature of reality. How can we perceive that what we experience can be real? It's like, all right, buddy, okay, great. You have fun with that. You have fun with this labyrinthine and ultimately pointless intellectual wankery. And I just want to be honest, I'm throwing that out there, Matt. I'm really not interested in a critique of capitalism or a postmodern deconstruction of heterosexuality and whiteness in interactive media, Matt. I just want to know if the new fucking Call of Duty is worth a buy. Is it a thumbs up? Is it a thumbs down? Because I'm a simple man, Matt. I'm just one of the plebs. These heady concepts that you speak of, they go beyond my understanding. For me, I just want to know, is there going to be titties in the next Platinum Games title? And that's kind of what I'm looking for from games journalism. I don't want to look at gaming through a racial, postmodern lens, Matt. I don't want to hear, when I see your mouth moving, I want to be deaf. So I first became aware of Matt Lees during his stint as a content producer for videogamer.com. And this was circa 2013, or just before Gamergate really kicked off. And during this era, the journalists, they still masked their contempt for the gaming community at least a little better. Like, they hadn't fully come out as just being completely loathsome of their own readership quite yet. And it's during this period that Matt kind of rises to prominence through a bunch of videos he produced for Video Gamer that went semi-viral, and I'm sure you may have actually seen a few. They're the E3 Abridged videos, where he kind of satirizes the pomp and circumstance and just overall ridiculousness of E3. They're pretty good videos, they're entertaining, and it's proof that, Matt is such a tragic case, because he clearly has talent. He has a flair for presenting. Although he does have this kind of cringe BBC-type demeanor, he's clearly capable of producing content to a high standard of quality, so I give him props for that. But here's where things start to go downhill. It seemed like his newfound success had kind of propelled him into this new realm of activist journalists and recognition from The Guardian and the BBC. And pretty soon, he's contributing to The Guardian. He's contributing to a Charlie Brooker normie bullshit gaming documentary. And the most cynical thing about it is that when you look at Matt's career from the outside, I think that deep down, the reason why Matt doesn't like to engage with critics or really anyone outside of his ideological safe space is because ultimately I think his beliefs are built on a weak foundation. I think that he went all in on the progressive bandwagon. And during the late Obama years, progressivism was basically going mainstream, and it seemed almost like the left would have cultural dominance for the foreseeable future. It was a kind of strange dystopian time. A time when ambitious and morally bankrupt people, they sold their souls to this neoliberal status quo. and they all shilled for it for years, and they were unbearable. They did and said some disgusting things, and they created resentment amongst just working class, normal people. Regular gamers who literally were just enjoying their hobby. They weren't hurting anyone, they weren't abusing or oppressing anybody, they were just minding their own business, having fun. And suddenly Gamergate kicks off, and we're all under attack. We're being demonized, and we have a subversive journalist class that is presenting a completely false narrative to the mainstream. So we have mainstream consensus that all gamers are these disgusting, misogynist pieces of shit, the worst. And you try and use us, our community that's existed for decades, as a tool to advance your own career. Your need for validation and approval from your peers and from the establishment, you basically try to sacrifice our entire community for your own self-interest and your pursuit of social capital. It's not even about money really either, it's just about validation, the adoration of his peers, seeing his face on the front page of Kotaku, or, being a talking head for retarded Charlie Grugbrain Brooker's new fucking shit documentary. It's this was the motivation. I think this is the motivation for a lot of far leftists. It's ego-driven. But I feel like after the timelines shifted, first you had Gamergate, and that traumatized the journalist class, but really only in gaming. And then you had Trump, and that was like a nuclear bomb on the very concept of modern journalism. And it is funny. I think that Matt's reaction to Gamergate was just so incredibly disingenuous and quite revealing about the man's moral character, I think. When all he could do was just shut himself off in this bubble and just continue to cry, gamers are dead, gamers are sexist misogynists, fascists everywhere, Nazis everywhere, Gamergate, Steve Bannon, the spirit of Hitler. He basically just completely melted down. I think maybe he knew that the jig was up. I think the walls were closing in. I think that the infamous Breitbart article that Milo wrote in defense of Gamergate, I think in Matt's world, that was an event equivalent to the birth of Slanesh. An unknowable, unspeakable, reactionary entity had just come into existence. He publicly disowned Total Biscuit because he had the audacity to try and remain neutral during Gamergate, right? Because again, TB, love him or hate him, rest his fucking soul, did advocate for the consumer, and he was a neutral voice in the gaming community at a time when the radicalism of people like Matt, the constant banshee screeching of these fucking ideologues, it was becoming unbearable. But you could look to TB, you could listen to a Total Biscuit podcast, and you could be like, okay, at least I'm getting some actual information here, separated from politics. And Matt had already been a guest on TB's co-optional podcast multiple times. And he gained a lot of exposure, he'd gained followers, subscribers, notoriety, and then when the time came to wash his hands of Total Biscuit, he did that with seemingly no regrets, and just threw the man under the bus, along with so many other journalists. And you had, of course, the infamous Leigh Alexander, the absolute harpy that penned the original anti-gamer article, Gamers Are Dead. Leigh Alexander is the wife of Matt Lee's business partner. Let that sink in. So, it turns out that the pro-Gamergate side that have criticized journalists for their nepotism and coordinating behind the scenes, their lack of ethics, their rampant political bias, it really almost seems to me, Matt, like Gamergate had a point. Like, it looks like they're right, and you deep down you know it. I think that you are terrified by the realization that you bet on the wrong horse. The mask has slipped. It's abundantly clear to everybody that you and your peers, you lack credibility, you lack humility, you're a narcissist, you're a grifter, a race baiter. You push a fucking destructive ideology that's hurting the hobby and the subculture that we love. And ironically, all you have to do to escape the prison that you've created for yourself, Matt, is admit that you were wrong. Admit that you don't know everything, that you don't have the right to lecture gamers, and shovel your postmodern garbage into our backyard. Because you know what, Matt? Gamers have always had a contentious relationship with the gaming press, even long before you came along. We've always been a community that are autistically sensitive to bullshit. And we've always pointed it out, we've always called it out. And back in my heyday, the pre-activist journalist contingent, they were basically just shills. They were out to make money, they were out to push Mountain Dew sponsorships, and they would give unreasonably high reviews, bought and paid for by big publishers. That was the shit that we were dealing with back then. But you know what? Even with all the obvious payola and corruption, I could still visit GameSpot and I could read a review by Greg Casavin, and I could read a fairly well thought out review by someone that understands the industry and is an actual fan of video games, not a resentful, failed mainstream journalist and political activist masquerading as a fan of video games. And incidentally, Greg Casavin of GameSpot, he founded his own studio, Supergiant Games, and he's made a bunch of extremely cool indie games giving back to the industry that he was once a critic of. But what's your legacy going to be, Matt? Your library of countless tweets accusing regular working class gamers of being sexist racists? Or you know what? I guess the irony of the situation is really that your true legacy will be the fact that you helped contribute, purely through the virtue of being such an incredible douchebag, to the creation of one of the most devastating reactionary movements in modern politics. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. You wrote about this in a think piece for The Guardian called What Gamergate Should Have Taught Us About the Alt-Right. So if your thesis is that without Gamergate, the alt-right and Trump would have never been a thing, well then you have to accept your role in justifying the very existence of the Gamergate movement itself.